Life, as we all know, has this way of just throwing curveballs, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
1 minute things feel okay, the next, boom. A critical incident, some really devastating event can just plunge us, or someone we care about, deep into crisis.
Yeah.
And it can be really personal, like a sudden scary medical diagnosis. Or maybe it's those broader tragedies we see, like broadcast instantly everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And those images, they really hit hard, don't they? Affecting all of us.
Definitely.
And that's exactly where we're heading today. We're jumping into a deep dive, really looking into the world of crisis and trauma counseling.
Right.
Our goal, our mission, if you like, is pretty clear. We want to break down those crucial differences between what a crisis is and what trauma is.
Right, because they get mixed up.
They do. And we'll explore some foundational ideas like relational cultural theory and look at the, frankly, surprising ways human connection and even new tech are reshaping how healing happens.
And I think it's important to say, this isn't just, for the specialists, the mental health pros.
Not at all.
This deep dive is really like a shortcut for anyone trying to get a handle on these fundamental human things, suffering resilience. The insights here are, they're relevant to everybody.
Absolutely.
Because we all, face the unexpected sooner or later. So, get ready for some moments that might make you think, aha.
Definitely some aha moments ahead.
So, okay, let's start maybe by clearing things up. This word crisis.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly are we talking about?
Good starting point.
Think of it like an immediate, totally unpredictable event that just swamps your usual ways of coping.
Yeah.
Completely overwhelms them.
Right.
It can hit one person, a family, even a whole community, like maybe getting a really threatening medical diagnosis or experiencing a miscarriage or suddenly losing your job.
Yeah, big life shocks.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And these moments, they often just shatter your sense of safety. They bring on this intense fear, sadness, devastation. And it's not just in your head, right?
Yeah.
It spills out, affects work, family, everything.
Mm-hmm. It disrupts everything. Now, when we shift to talking about trauma, we're looking at something, related but distinct. It's a really deep emotional, mental, and physical response.
Physical, too.
Oh, absolutely. A response to a powerfully negative experience where serious harm was perceived, either to yourself or maybe someone else you care deeply about.
Okay.
So examples could be things like, violence, sexual assault, abuse, major disasters, war. And there's also this concept of complex trauma.
Right. I've heard that term.
Yeah, it's important. It's not usually a single event. It's more like repetitive, prolonged stressors, often involving things like betrayal or relational violence, especially from caregivers during vulnerable periods.
Wow. It sounds incredibly difficult.
It is, and trauma isn't just an individual thing either. It can actually ripple through whole communities, even across generations. It can literally shape cultures and values over time.
Okay, so here's where it gets super interesting for me. Lots of people, myself included sometimes, use crisis and trauma almost like they're the same thing.
Very common, yes.
But you're saying there's a crucial difference. Most of us, we go through crises, a relationship ends, we get sick for a bit, but not every single crisis automatically becomes trauma.
Precisely. That's the key distinction. A crisis, while awful, tends to resolve over time. Maybe it leaves a scar, but you integrate it.
Okay.
But trauma, that can lead to really persistent, debilitating symptoms. Things like flashbacks, nightmares, chronic anxiety, maybe even PTSD. It can profoundly affect someone's entire life, their relationships, for years and years.
So that begs the question, right? Why? Why does one situation lead to that lasting impact, that trauma, while another, also difficult, eventually resolves? What's the mechanism there?
That is the fundamental question, and it's exactly where professional counseling can make such a difference. What's really striking when you look across all the effective ways to help is that genuine human connection keeps popping up as the most vital piece.
Connection again.
Always connection.
Oh.
And one powerful framework for this is something called trauma-informed care, or TEAC.
TEAC.
Yeah, and it's not just about what one counselor does. It's about how an entire organization, like a clinic or a school, top to bottom, recognizes how widespread trauma is.
So the whole system gets it.
Exactly. The whole system understands that people cope in all sorts of different ways. The goal is holistic health and healing for everyone involved. Because, you see, trauma can leave the brain kind of, stuck in a state of threat.
Stuck? How so?
It leads to things like intrusive memories popping up, or feeling emotionally numb, or dissociating, feeling disconnected from yourself or reality. And that's why having someone show compassion, be responsive, it's absolutely crucial to help unlock that stuck state.
Wow. So if the brain can get literally stuck, how do we approach healing in a way that actually, unsticks it?
Great question. And that brings us neatly to relational cultural theory, RCT.
RCT, okay.
At its core, RCT really turns some traditional psychological thinking upside down. For a long time, many theories focused on separation and independence as the main goals for growth. Be your own person, stand alone.
Right, that sounds familiar.
But RCT says, hold on, real growth, real healing. That doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through connection, authentic, mutual connection.
Mutual, meaning both ways.
Exactly. It grew out of work, initially by Jean Baker Miller and colleagues, that really highlighted how important connection was, especially for women and other marginalized groups whose needs were often ignored by those older theories. But now it's seen as relevant for everyone. It speaks to a universal human need.
That feels intuitive somehow. But is there science behind it?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where it gets really compelling. The scientific backing comes from relational neuroscience. Research is showing us that humans are, literally, wired for connection.
Wired for it.
Yep. Our brains are social organs. And trauma, it can actually impact our neurobiology, change brain chemistry, affect how we regulate emotions, how we interact.
So it physically changes the brain.
It can, yes. But, and this is the incredibly hopeful part, the brain also has remarkable neuroplasticity.
Ah, plasticity, the ability to change.
Precisely. It means the brain can regenerate, rewire, heal. And those growth-fostering connections we talked about, relational counseling, they can actually promote brain health. They can influence that neuroplasticity. It offers immense hope.
That's huge. The brain actually healing itself through connection. So what does that look like in practice? What are the core ideas in RCT?
Okay, well, one core principle is growth in connection. The idea is that mutually rewarding social connections where both people feel seen and valued actually foster emotional growth. And they create a desire for more connection.
So connection breeds connection.
Kind of, yeah. It's a positive cycle. And it really challenges those cultural messages that sometimes tell us to be stoic, be individualistic, see vulnerability as weakness.
Right. Suppress, don't express.
RCT flips that.
Yeah.
Another key principle is authenticity. RCT sees the courage to really represent yourself fully in a relationship. Your true thoughts, feelings, vulnerabilities, that's absolutely central to growth. It's a source of strength, not weakness.
Being real, basically.
Being real. And then there's context. Counselors using RCT really try to understand a client's life circumstances, their environment, their history. This prevents misdiagnosis.
How so? Give me an example.
Well, think about women with complex trauma histories. Sometimes, because of behaviors developed to survive exploitation, they might get misdiagnosed with something like borderline personality disorder.
Right.
But an RCT lens, looking at the context of trauma, might see those behaviors as adaptations, pointing instead towards PTSD and focusing on strengths developed despite the trauma. It promotes post-traumatic growth.
Seeing strengths instead of just pathology. I like that.
Exactly. It's strength-based. Then there's power. RCT distinguishes between power with, shared power, mutual influence, and power over, which is about exploitation, control, dominance. Healthy relationships use power with.
Power with, not power over. Got it.
And this leads to a really intriguing point, something called a relational paradox.
A paradox. Okay, tell me more.
Well, people deeply, deeply yearn for connection, right? It's fundamental. But sometimes, out of fear, judgment, rejection, vulnerability, they engage in these protective, but ultimately disconnecting strategies.
Like hiding parts of themselves.
Exactly. They might hide their true feelings, agree when they don't agree, just to keep the relationship, even if it's not authentic. They see it as a strategy for survival.
But it backfires.
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
It can lead to what RCT calls condemned isolation, this profound loneliness, even when you're in relationships. And RCT considers this the greatest form of human suffering.
Wow. Condemned isolation. That's powerful.
It really is. But the flip side, the antidote, is relational resilience. When you do have genuine connections, where you can process difficult experiences safely, feel respected, that builds incredible resilience. It's invaluable.
So it's the quality of the connection that makes the difference.
Absolutely. And this ties into relational ethics for counselors, too. It's not just about following rules, asking, what should I do? It's more about asking, who should I be in this relationship with this client right now? How can I embody mutuality, compassion, understanding their context? It demands more, maybe, but it helps the counselor truly grasp the client's inner world and foster that healing power with dynamic.
Okay, that paints a really clear picture of the theory. So thinking about the counselors themselves, the ones doing this incredibly demanding work, What qualities are most critical when working with crisis and trauma?
Yeah, good question. The sources consistently point to a few key things: compassion, responsiveness, and resourcefulness.
Compassion, that seems obvious, but what does it mean here?
In this context, it's literally suffering with someone. It's not just pity. It's noticing another's pain, being genuinely moved by it, and having that desire to make a difference. It echoes that mutual empathy in RCT.
Suffering with.
Okay.
And responsiveness.
Responsiveness is about that dynamic interplay. It's being attuned, anticipating how your words or actions might land with the client. It's noticing, caring, being open to feedback, adjusting your approach. It's a dance, really.
A relational dance. Makes sense. So, in the immediate aftermath of something terrible, what's the counselor's role? It's different from long-term therapy, right?
Very different, yes. Initially, it's all about creating immediate safety. Physical safety, emotional safety, assessing the most urgent needs: shelter, food, medical care, providing that vital human connection when someone feels utterly alone and terrified.
Just being there.
Just being there, and connecting them to essential resources. But crucially, it also involves respecting the community's readiness for outside help.
What do you mean?
Well, think about major tragedies like in Newtown, Connecticut, or Sutherland Springs, Texas. Outside helpers rushed in, but sometimes the community needs space first. Effective support often means waiting, listening, and offering help only when the community itself indicates it's ready and what kind of help they need, respecting their pace.
That's such an important point about respecting the community. And it makes me wonder about another vital group here, the counselors themselves.
Yeah.
They're on the front lines, hearing these stories, holding this pain. What does this work actually demand of them? How do they keep going?
It's absolutely critical we talk about this because research shows the quality of the therapeutic relationship itself is one of the biggest predictors of whether counseling actually helps.
So the counselor's well-being directly impacts the client's outcome.
Directly. Counselor wellness isn't some optional add-on. It's not a luxury. It is vital for providing effective care. It means integrating, body, mind, spirit, community, taking care of the whole self. If counselors are burnt out or impaired, they simply can't offer that attuned, compassionate presence.
And they must be at risk hearing such difficult things.
Hugely at risk. There's something called vicarious trauma or secondary trauma. Just hearing harrowing stories day after day can actually start to change a counselor's own worldview.
How so?
They might start seeing the world as a much more dangerous place, lose faith in others, feel constantly anxious. It can lead to burnout and serious impairment if self-care isn't actively prioritized.
What?
It's why, ethically, counselors are required to monitor their own effectiveness, their own functioning. The ACA Code of Ethics is very clear on this. And thankfully, there's research supporting wellness practices. Things like specific wellness classes for counselors have been shown to boost job satisfaction, reduce burnout, increase productivity. Self-care is a professional necessity.
A professional necessity.
Right.
That reframes it completely. Okay, shifting gears slightly, but staying with challenges.
Yes.
We live in this incredibly connected world now. Technology. How does that play into crisis and trauma?
It's a really complex role, isn't it? On one hand, connection. On the other, well, that instantaneous media exposure we talked about earlier, it can unfortunately lead to vicarious trauma, even for people nowhere near the actual event.
Right, just seeing those images over and over.
Exactly. There was this powerful anecdote shared by a counselor named Thelma about her experience during 9/11. She was watching the news, terrified, seeing the towers fall, knowing her son worked nearby. The relentless images were traumatizing for her. And then just days later, a client came in describing similar graphic experiences from the media that were haunting her. It really drives home how limiting media exposure, especially for kids, but for adults too, during these big tragic events can be a protective factor.
Reducing that secondary exposure.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And technology's role, both positive and negative, comes into sharp focus with a really poignant case from Texas. David's Law.
David's Law. Tell me about that.
David Molak was a 16-year-old boy, bright kid, but he was subjected to absolutely brutal bullying, including relentless cyberbullying. Tragically, he died by suicide.
Awful.
Just heartbreaking. But his family, in their grief, channeled that pain into advocacy. They fought tirelessly for an anti-bullying law in Texas, which became known as David's Law. It's such a powerful, though tragic, example. It shows how a personal crisis, amplified by technology like cyberbullying, can have devastating ripples. But, and this is key, it also shows how that same tragedy can become a catalyst. a catalyst for community action, for compassion, for real legislative change, turning that immense loss into a legacy of hope, trying to prevent it from happening to others.
That's incredible strength from that family, turning loss into legacy. So connecting all these threads, where's this field heading? What are the new technologies, the new approaches shaping the future of crisis and trauma counseling?
It's a really dynamic field right now. Lots of innovation happening. One area is leveraging technology directly for healing. Take neurofeedback.
Neurofeedback, how does that work?
It's a fascinating process facilitated by technology. Clinicians essentially help clients learn to gain more conscious control over their own brainwave patterns.
It can control your brainwaves.
To a degree, yes. The goal is to help the brain re-regulate itself, to dial down those automatic, overwhelming reactions to stressful memories, that stuck state we talked about, and promote more optimal, flexible brain functioning.
Interesting. What else?
Then there's virtual reality, VR. People might think of gaming, but it's being used therapeutically now.
VR for therapy.
Yeah. Creating these immersive, realistic, but controlled environments. Clients can practice confronting fears or maybe reprocessing traumatic events in a safe virtual space. It's a powerful way to do exposure therapy because it engages the senses, not just memory. You gain mastery in real time, essentially.
That sounds potentially transformative. Are there non-tech innovations too?
Absolutely. There's growing interest in mind-body approaches, things like acupuncture or EFT, emotional freedom techniques, sometimes called tapping. Yeah, tapping on certain acupressure points, also mantra-based meditation, yoga. These methods really focus on that deep integration of mind and body for healing. The research is still evolving on exactly how effective they are as standalone, first-line treatments, but they seem to tap into something important about somatic experience.
Integrating the body back into healing.
Exactly. And finally, there's a really important push towards brief and targeted approaches.
Brief. Why brief?
Well, a significant challenge with some traditional PTSD therapies, especially those requiring prolonged exposure, repeatedly reliving the trauma in detail, is that dropout rates can be quite high. It's incredibly difficult work for the client.
Understandably.
So newer interventions are emerging, like art-accelerated resolution therapy and WET, which stands for written exposure therapy. These approaches try to distill the most effective techniques into fewer, more manageable sessions.
So getting the core benefits without such a long, arduous process.
That's the idea. And early results are promising. They seem to have better completion rates, meaning more people stick with it. And they're showing positive outcomes. It's about finding effective and accessible ways to help people heal.
That seems crucial, making effective help reachable.
Definitely. And looking ahead, the future directions seem to continue focusing on integrating systems at all levels, from big political institutional structures down to the neurobiological, the relational, the spiritual, the emotional realities of trauma, always with an eye on that fundamental healing power of relationships.
Wow. Okay, we have covered so much ground today. We've taken this deep dive into understanding crisis and trauma, looking at the really distinct ways they impact us. And we've seen just how profoundly important human connection is. It really feels like the cornerstone of healing in everything we discussed.
It really does emerge as the central theme.
We looked at how theories like relational cultural theory are challenging some older ways of thinking and how exciting new technologies are actually expanding the possibilities for support and recovery.
And we learned that the brain isn't fixed, right? It's wired for connection. And these positive relational experiences can genuinely promote healing, even foster that amazing neuroplasticity.
Yeah, the brain can heal.
We also really highlighted the critical need for compassion, not just for those experiencing crisis, but also for the counselors walking alongside them.
Right.
Emphasizing that self-care isn't selfish, it's a professional imperative.
Absolutely. A necessity. Ultimately, I think this whole deep dive really reminds us that while these critical events can feel like they shatter everything,
They can.
the power of genuine human connection, that resilience we see in stories like David's Law, can forge these incredible paths towards healing and ultimately towards hope.
Well said. Hope is key.
So here's maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to kind of mull over after this conversation.
Yeah.
Given how deeply fundamentally wired we seem to be for connection, and how it seems to underlie both the worst suffering that condemned isolation and the most profound healing that relational resilience, what small daily acts of genuine connection could you maybe cultivate in your own life, your own relationships, to help build a more resilient world, one relationship at a time? Something to think about.